Hi, everyone, and welcome to our live stream. We're here at Gary's place at the Rusted Garden. Gary, welcome to the live stream.
Thanks for having me. And we're at the Rusted Garden, and we're doing your live stream. So this is really cool.
That's right. We're actually streaming live on Gary's channel as well, if all is working as planned.
I think it'll be all right.
So we're really glad that you all are here. Thanks for joining us on a Friday afternoon, and the locusts are singing away. We're actually really enjoying the locust sounds. We don't have those in California, so it's a really nice sound.
I mean, the thing is like when we used to do gardening coast to coast, West Coast is very different than the East Coast. So it's always nice when we visit you guys come here, we see what's going on. And the gardens are different too. So today when you're asking questions, we're ready to take questions coast to coast.
That's right. And we're actually going to be talking about fall gardening and sharing some tips with you today. Essential really to get your fall garden going. And then of course, taking a lot of Q's and A's in between. And I see lots of comments of people here in the chat. Welcome. Leslie, can't wait for fall gardening. Let's get that party started. Absolutely right. It's a little bit more muggier here in Maryland than it is back home. So a lot of people have really been suffering through the summer heat. Fall gardening is such a pleasant time of the year to be outdoors. It cools down in most areas in September, and it just makes gardening a little more pleasant than being out there in 95-degree weather and 95% humidity like you might have here sometimes.
Well, you missed your key. That you came when it's in the 80s, a little bit humid, but for really 6 or 8 weeks, it was 95 degrees plus, high humidity, and it was miserable. And I get burned out. I've been telling, people that subscribe and follow me. From like July 15th till maybe last week, like the garden, I get burned out. So you're right, the fall garden kind of revitalizes me too. I'm thinking cool weather. We've got some stuff already planted in my garden we'll be talking about. But August is a great time to maybe get your last round of warm crops in, but certainly start thinking about planting your fall garden.
Definitely. And we actually just filmed several videos while we're here. So make sure you check those out on both of our channels. I think Gary's already launched one on his channel about compost. I'll be doing one on cucumbers, and stay tuned for maybe an hour or so video on 25 to 35 garden tips that we just filmed before this live stream. So we're actually a little bit hot and sweaty here.
A little tired.
A little bit tired, but we're here for you guys. And good afternoon from Tennessee, Sabrina from Brooklyn, New York. I saw someone here from Denmark earlier. So it's really fun to have this garden community literally all over the world that comes together to talk about growing our own food and just enjoying the process along the way. So it's really a lot of fun. Jackie from Oklahoma, she's here every Monday on our live stream. So glad that you're here.
One of the great things is that gardeners, we do the same thing across the globe, every country. And I just want to say, I think we're great people. We're happy.
We sure are.
We take care of each other. We all have the same question. What's wrong with my tomato plant? Doesn't matter what country you're in. And I just wish gardeners were involved more. Let's not get into politics, but in the decision making, because if we had more gardeners around, I think the world would be a better place.
Absolutely. Gardeners are some of the nicest people. And I do get the question a lot, do your tips just apply, or your how-tos just apply to Southern California or frost-free zones? And absolutely not. The fall gardening tips and any tips or tricks that we share, how-tos that we share, what I try and do, and I know you do similar, Gary, is share general gardening principles that will apply across the board. And then I share a lot of specific ideas to Southern California, but also try and include those northern gardeners that might be growing a totally different zone than I am.
Right.
And I'm sure you do the same thing too on your channel and your live streams.
And for people that don't know me, I'm in Maryland Zone 7. So we get a freezing winter, which means 20-degree temperatures regularly in the teens, ground freezes. For people that follow me that don't know you, you're on the West Coast. It's really easy to garden there. The temperature is always wonderful. No,
it's great. No, we do have a lot of heat in the summertime, but the winter is really perfect for growing the cooler vegetables, and can definitely grow something year round. So the frost-free zones do have some special considerations, which we'll get into today with our fall gardening tips as well. Well, let's just jump in. And first off, just start off with, what is a fall garden? If you've never grown a fall garden before, you may not even be familiar with that term. So Gary, why don't you share a little bit about that?
So you have two types of crops. You have your warm crops that can't take a frost. If they freeze, they're damaged. And we all have springs. Some of them are shorter. And we all have falls. Some of them are longer. So in the spring, you grow the cool weather crops because they like the cold temperature, the cooler soil temperature. They can take a frost. And in the spring, you're going from freezing temperatures to warmer temperatures. And then we plant the warm crops late spring through the summer. And then, if it doesn't freeze like in your area, you can continue with the warm crops. But in Maryland, we have to switch over to the fall garden, which is going to be the cool weather crops again. So we're growing out of the heat of August into the cool temperatures of September, the frost of October, and then the frost of November, and then the heavier freezes that roll in December. So the cool crops are really your fall garden, at least here in Maryland Zone 7.
That's right. And if you're a southern gardener, and I like to define southern gardeners as gardeners who, generally speaking, do not get frosts or heavy frosts in the wintertime. So you're in one of those southern areas of the U.S., like Southern California, although it can apply all the way up to Northern California, Florida, Texas, Arizona, Tennessee sometimes. Any of those areas that have very mild to moderate winters. So for us right now in August, it's still a little bit early to be planting the cool weather crops out in the garden. So what I like to do is wait just a little bit, probably the end of September, October. I'll start some seeds either indoors or outdoors in a shady area, and then really don't get them transplanted in the garden until the winter time. So really November to February is really our prime time for growing cool weather vegetables. Really, if I wait or if I plant cool weather vegetables in March, we're really getting into hotter temperatures then for most years anyway. So it's a little bit different depending on where you live, but the principles of warm weather vegetables and cool weather vegetables are pretty much the same. So generally speaking, temperature wise, Gary, why don't you just explain like what temperatures are kind of good for cool weather vegetables versus warm weather vegetables so people have an idea of when to plant them.
So again, I'm in Maryland, 80 degree, 90 degree temperatures right now in August. Cool weather vegetables really love 50 to 60 degree nights when the temperatures are dropping. They like 70 degree day temperature. They like soil temperature when the earth is staying around, I don't know, 50, 65 degrees. They just like the coolness. And they grow much slower. When you give too much heat to the cool weather crops, they bolt. That means they want to send up flowers, they want to produce seed, and you just don't get that delicious, crispy lettuce, spinach. You don't get a nice forming head of broccoli because the temperatures are all wrong. So part of what I like people to think about is, you're talking, California, I'm talking Maryland. You might have to experiment when you put your seeds in for the cool weather crop in August, and just take notes, and then maybe do some now and then maybe some in 2 weeks. And then next year, you'll know when's the best time to put in your transplants or your seeds. But it is going to vary garden to garden. Just use what we're talking about as guidelines.
That's right. Guidelines. And that's a perfect lead in, kind of this question here from Gardening with Candy. Hi, CaliKim. Can you suggest some fall crops that will do well in Ohio Zone 6? So again, we're talking about general garden principles. So if you choose cool weather crops, they're going to grow for the most part when the temperature is, between say 40 degrees or even freezing on up to 75 degrees. So whether you're in Ohio or California or Maryland, you can kind of gauge when those cool weather crops go in, when the temperatures are consistently in that temperature range in your area. So for example, great cool weather crops will have a whole fall garden seed collection with 14 different varieties that are specifically designed for growing in cooler temperatures. They can include things like broccoli, cauliflower, radishes. A lot of the leafy greens do beautiful in cool weather. I love growing lettuce all winter long. I'm always kind of bummed when the warm weather hits and the lettuce bolts. But you can still grow a lot of heat-tolerant lettuces or varieties of greens as well. Some of those leafy greens like kale and chard and even collards will do well in the heat, in the cool temperatures, and are extremely cold tolerant and will even take pretty hard frosts. I'm sure you've experienced that here.
A couple of things you were saying I think is really important. When you're going from end of August into the fall, we're going towards a 32 degree freezing temperatures. When you get close to that, the plants might survive, but they stop growing. When you're going from the spring, 32 degrees, into the warmth, they're taking off and growing. So you do want to get that balance to answer, the question. I can't read the chat, so I can't see who you are or what the question was. But you're similar to Maryland. We're Zone 7, you're Zone 6. You can pretty much plant what I'm talking about, but you can get in carrots and you can get in radishes, lettuces, spinach, all that kind of stuff. You really are at a good time to get your cool weather crops into the ground.
And I think it's important to start now, especially if you're in those areas that do get cooler or colder freezing temperatures, to start now, whether you're starting from seeds indoors, getting your transplants going, and then waiting until it's a little bit cooler to transplant them out into the garden. But the key is really starting early in those areas, because you want to get them out in the garden, get the roots established in the ground, and that way they have a much better chance of doing well as the temperatures cool down and surviving those first few light frosts of wintertime.
And nudge me if I'm repeating myself, because we just
Okay.
did like almost probably a 90-minute video on all these tips. Did we talk about that the cool weather crops can freeze, or was that in the video?
Yes, we did. We
Okay.
did. But well, here.
Not here.
Oh, we did in our video. But if you want to mention that again,
Yeah.
like why they can take the frost.
What's really cool and what differentiates the cool weather crops, besides liking the cool weather, they can actually freeze. Like I love taking pictures in the morning after a frost of my leafy greens. There's just beautiful patterns on there. They are frozen solid. Like you can almost break it off. The cool weather crops, most of them can freeze solid, and then when it warms up, they defrost and they're perfectly fine. The cell structure of the leaf doesn't get damaged. Your warm crops, soon as a frost comes, hit your tomato plant, your pepper plant, it disrupts the leaves, the cells, and they're dead. So cool weather crops are really hardy when it's cold.
And here's
and
a great
frost.
question for you to answer, because I don't have winters to speak of anyway. Sharon is asking, which cool weather crops can last through winter too, if any?
So in Maryland, again, our temperatures get into the 20s, occasionally into the teens, not so much anymore. But your sometimes cabbage, broccoli and cabbage, or I'm sorry, cauliflower will last. Definitely your kale, sometimes collards. I love growing kale and chard through the winter here because it survives. And then they come back, in the spring. What's really cool about kale is it's a biennial. So in that second spring, it's putting out all these little flowers and buds, and they're delicious. They taste like broccoli. So you may get hundreds of buds on your kale plant. You can use them, you can eat them. You can also eat the flowers. So kale is definitely one that makes it. Carrots will make it, but they're biennials, and sometimes they don't form a great carrot because they're trying to flower in the second spring. And then beets also can survive too. The beet itself sometimes is beat up and really you can't eat it, but it'll grow greens and you can eat the beet greens.
So it's another hardy green that you can be growing in your garden. And those root crops, do you leave yours in all winter? Do they survive because they have a little more insulation with the soil around them, and then pull them? Well, the ground's probably too frozen to get them out, or how does that work usually?
So my ground doesn't freeze that much anymore, but not really till, I don't know, maybe January. So anything that's not going to really make it through the winter, I'm pulling out late November, early December.
So I saw a question here. I think it was from Sister Marcel. If Freetown's having fall seedlings for sale, do you have any idea? Or maybe you can explain a little bit about Freetown as well for those who don't know.
So Freetown Farm is part of the Community Ecology Institute, and I'm a board member on the Community Ecology Institute. When COVID rolled in, I retired, started doing the garden full time, but needed to find people. So I'm like, well, where should I go? Freetown Farm, part of Community Ecology Institute. It's 6 acres. I'm helping grow food there. I'm helping grow transplants. So every Saturday we have a plant sale. And in the beginning of April, May, we have all these wonderful spring plants. But we are going to have plants for the fall too, for just what we're talking about. So you're going to see some of them there. Lots of natives. But every Saturday, come to Freetown Farm, Columbia, Maryland, 9 to 1. We have a small market garden. We have plants for sale. And every year we're getting bigger and bigger. So next year is going to be spectacular.
And they really are beautiful plants. It's a beautiful spot. If you're in the area, just go over and take a look at it. The other thing you can do too is purchase the plants. They're a really good price over there, and you're also helping Freetown Farm. But also start from seed. Now in the video we just shot, we talked a little bit about you can start from seed indoors, but if you don't want to go through all the hassle of getting your grow light set up again, you can definitely start from seed outdoors in a shadier area. Just to protect it from the heat and to protect it from the intensity of the sun, just like you normally would inside. Just lay your 6-packs and your flats out, pop in your cool garden, your cool weather seedlings in there, and that way you're saving yourself the extra step of hardening them off. Then as soon as the weather cools off a little bit in your garden that might be getting full sun, you can plant them in there and you'll have your fall garden going, and then get those roots established before the frost hits, like we mentioned, and you'll be that much ahead. Now, I mentioned my fall garden seed collection. I know, Gary, you've got a seed shop as well. We actually just started a Labor Day sale. We're offering 50% off all of our seed collections. So it's a great time to head over to our website, CaliKim Garden and Home, and pick up that whole collection for half off. And you've
Well,
got a lot of fall
we do, but
seed
we're having
packets too.
60% off.
Oh, thank
No,
you.
I'm just
No.
kidding. We're not. So, but I do have a shop, but you have a good
Yeah.
deal. So
Well, he's got individual seed packets too. I have the collections. You have seed packets, so it's a good way to, kind of work together on that too. Because I get a lot of people that say, "Do you sell this individual seed packet?" And I just send them over to your shop.
if you need neem oil or peppermint oil or rosemary oil, come to my shop. I can read the next question. I think.
Sure, go ahead.
So it's from Trisha. I hope I got the name right.
Hi,
But
Trisha.
it says, I'm in zone 7. When would be a good time to transplant my fall garden into the garden? So you're doing transplants. Now is a really good time. And I was saying it a little bit sooner. The temperatures are coming down in Maryland into the 80s, 60-degree nights. That's really the signal that the transplants can go in. If it's a little bit hot, or if something freakish happens, like next week, temperatures are going to be up in 100 degrees, that's when you can use the shade cloth. So you can get them in now, but keep an eye on the temperature. And if the temperatures are elevated into the 90s for several days, maybe put a 50% shade cloth over them, cool the soil down. Because the nemesis for the cool crops, the fall crops, is the sun beating down into the top 2-4 inches of your soil and really heating it up to 100, 110 degrees.
That's right. And then that is going to be the nemesis of them, and they may not survive. Here's a great question. Let's see. Here it is from DeBoz. And Gary, I'm going to have you address this one too, because you've got some nice looking carrots, tops anyway, grown in your garden, and they won't grow too well in my area at this point in time, but you've got the secret down. So why don't you explain that? DeBoz says, carrots will mature in fall for a harvest. Thought it took 4 months.
It's true. And the difference is, one, it depends on the variety. So carrots could be less than 4 months. The other thing too is the seed packets aren't the most reliable, and they're giving you just generalities. When you're planting carrots into the warm soil, and most of your crops in general, they really accelerate their growth and they mature a lot quicker. So when you're planting in August, you're using that warmth to really get bigger plants more quickly. So you don't need as much time in the fall. The other thing is, in Maryland, I put my carrots in 718 actually. We were just talking about that. And they have nice, sized carrots already. August, September, October, the frost is coming in late October, November, but a little bit of frost isn't going to slow the carrots down. It's when that ground begins to freeze. So it's not just the frost date, it's when the temperature of the ground really gets down and stays in the lower 40s that carrots slow down. So you have a lot more time than you might think.
And the other thing too is, if you don't have a lot of time, you can definitely grow smaller varieties of carrots. There's really short ones you can grow.
Danvers.
The really long ones will definitely, take probably 90 days or plus. But look for smaller varieties. And in general, that's what I recommend for fall gardening, especially if you live in a farther north area where you might have early frosts. I know our other moderator, Cliff, who's not able to be here today in Idaho, he said sometimes by the end of September, he can get a freeze or really a light frost, maybe not so much a hard freeze. So if you're one of those gardeners, or maybe in Canada, grow smaller, more compact veggies. And I do have a lot of those in my fall garden seed collection. I mean, smaller varieties of cabbages, the broccolini rather than a big, huge, full-size broccoli, because they'll mature quicker and you'll be able to have a much better chance of getting a harvest before the colder weather sets in. So look for those varieties that will do well in your season. And I always have a hard time growing things like broccoli and cauliflower, because even in our winters, we have random warm days of 85, 90, maybe even 95 degrees. So I do tend to grow smaller varieties of cool weather vegetables for that reason, because I have a much better chance of getting it to harvest in our kind of warmish winter weather. So just kind of gauge where you're at and then plan accordingly.
Our problem is a little bit different. Like if I try and grow broccoli and cauliflower spring, or maybe late winter, early spring into early summer, it gets warm so fast, the broccoli doesn't form, it just flowers. And broccoli needs a long period of cool temperatures to form, the beautiful crowns. So I have more success growing from August into the fall. The other thing when you're planning this is you are thinking about the last frost date. You can look that up online, but that doesn't mean everything stops growing. That just gives you the idea of counting back 60, 90 days of when you want to get some of these crops in. And like you're saying, if you get varieties that mature on a shorter amount of days, you're going to do better. Like now, I can actually put in cucumbers, but I look for cucumbers that mature in 50 days instead of maybe 65, 70. kind of play the period of time, I want to get it right, that it takes for the vegetable to mature and use that to your advantage.
That's right. And, you know, this might seem like a lot of information, but I want to encourage you to just try it. Try a couple of vegetables. You don't have to start off growing 15 cool weather vegetables. Maybe pick a couple of things, maybe 3 to 5 vegetables or even less. Start in a small container. If you're interested in salads and love salads, just grow a little smart pot full of nice leafy greens, maybe some cool weather herbs like parsley, dill, cilantro, chives, and just kind of experiment, get your feet wet, test it out. And then next year you can add to it and kind of adjust, you know, the timing of things from whatever mistakes you might have made this year. So don't be afraid to make mistakes and don't be afraid just to jump in. And I kill plants all the time. So if plants die, it's okay.
On the date you plant. So you could do, like I see people talking about carrots. Don't they take 3 months, 4 months? Put some carrots in right now. Put some carrots in 3 weeks from now and just mark the dates down and use it as an experiment. And then you're going to be able to figure out the exact almost planting times that are unique to your garden by just taking notes, really.
That's right. Let's see. I'm scrolling up to find a
Looking
question.
for a question.
Here we, oops. Oh, Nisha popped her Smart Pots code up there. Thank you very much, Nisha. You can get a 10% discount. But here's a question from Eaglet Longlegs. For first frost dates of October 31st in zone 7A, so maybe fairly close to where you're at, when do I pull my tomatoes to make room for fall transplants?
Well, I mean, it's really up to you. You can pull them anytime. As it starts getting colder, really beginning of October, you're not going to really get ripening tomatoes. So if you have to pull them out, or if you have to keep them in there as long as you want, you know, sometime in October. But you can often prune out the bottom of the tomato plants, loosen the soil around there, and put in, for instance, your peas, which are only going to be so tall, maybe by the beginning of October, or other cool weather crops. And then when the frost comes and that tomato's dead, instead of yanking that whole tomato out and disturbing the roots and everything, just cut it to the ground. And then the cool weather crops are already there and growing.
And a little tip I like to do for tomatoes, you know, we'll switch to tomatoes for just a moment, even though they're a warm weather crop, is in California about this time of the year, you know, my tomatoes are actually just coming on from the summertime. We had a really late spring, really late summer. So I leave them in for a little bit longer. But about this time, I'm planting some cold tolerant tomatoes. So I just put some in last week, put more in when we get home. And that way, when my summer tomatoes are done producing, they're starting to look really beat up, I've got some colder tolerant tomatoes that'll last me through the winter time. So I tried that last year for the first time with some new varieties, and they weren't producing tons in the winter, but I definitely had tomatoes all winter. Didn't have to buy any at the grocery store, which is kind of my goal. I don't ever want to have to buy them. So you Southern gardeners, be doing that now. The Tiny Tims are a great choice for that. Those are in my late summer garden seed collection. I've got a Oregon spring tomato as a good variety. I don't have that in my seed collections, but you can look for seeds for that online. And that's a really good cold tolerant tomato that's bred in Oregon where they have cooler summers. So it's worked well in Southern California as well.
You can too, if you're doing fall crops, and I'm just thinking, you know, I have a really big garden. It's a teaching garden, so you don't really need that much for 2 people in my family right now, or a family of 4. But if you don't have a lot of room, you can just clear out a small space and you can put in kale plants pretty close together or cabbage plants pretty close together. Let them grow there, and they're sort of going to be your transplant. So in a little square area, you can be growing your transplants. And then when those tomatoes and peppers and other crops are ready to be pulled out, you don't have to worry about, you know, putting them where you want them to be. They become transplants in another part of your garden. Just dig out a big root ball, move it over to where that tomato was, and you're able to transplant your fall garden that way.
Perfect. We answered Sharon's question there about cool weather crops. So I'm actually going to move on here to Terry's question. Terry's in Southern California, not too far from where we live. We actually got to meet her at our last book launch event, so it was really neat. Terry's question is, how do we prepare for fall pests? I just started getting tiny, shiny brown moths. I'm hesitant to plant anything since I don't know what they are. They may be laying eggs. Terry, I'm going to go ahead and take that question since I know you're near me. You pretty much handle the fall and winter pests the same way you handle them in the summer. And I know we've talked a lot about that on our live stream. Monterey, I believe they're still here, is great products for pest and disease control. So we've talked a lot about using the takedown, which will immediately kill on contact. If it's a chewing, so I use that a lot for the aphids, but if it's a chewing insect, like I'm not quite sure what type of moth that is, but it might be laying eggs for some type of chewing insect. So if it's a chewing insect, you want to use the, why is it escaping me at the moment? The garden insect spray, because that will actually soak down into the leaves, penetrate the leaves. Like for the leaf miners, it will take care of those, and will take care of the chewing insects as well. But it stays on the leaves for a good, and soaks into the leaves for a good 5 days or so. So you follow the same general principles we've been talking about on our live stream and our videos for the past couple of months for the fall insects as well. That being said, once the weather shifts to colder temperatures, we don't have near as many insect problems. Once we get rain and really the seasons change, it takes care of a lot of that for us. So we have it more in moderation in the fall and winter.
Yeah, Monterey has really good products, so I do recommend those. And what's really cool about the fall garden, summer garden, insects, disease, they all have their own cycle. So what I would say is don't wait for them to go away. I get damage from pests and disease pretty regularly. The best thing to do is pick products that you trust, that work, and have a plan in place and start spraying and take notes. Like whatever you saw, the shiny brown.
I think a moth or something.
Moth, yeah.
Yes.
Make a note when you saw it. Make a note when you saw the eggs, and then count back 15 days. So next year, you're starting to spray preventatively 2 weeks ahead of time. And you do this for summer crops, fall crops. That helps manage them. You're always going to get damage and loss from disease and pests. The goal is to really manage it down and just get more of a harvest. But I wouldn't wait till they go away, because they might go away and then another pest rolls in. So just anticipate you're going to lose some plants to problems, but you're still going to get wonderful harvest out of your garden.
I think that's a big thing too, is just managing your expectations. Expect that you're going to have some disease, some pests coming in. Expect that you're going to have plants that die. You know, we're all experimenting. We're all in this together. And I find that for me, when I'm managing my expectations and then have some products on hand, just keep them in your garden shed that will help knock down the pests or help knock down the disease. You're going to be well armed and equipped to handle problems when they do come. But don't let that stop you from getting seeds in the ground or getting transplants in the ground. Just get started. That's the most important thing. Here's a great question from Lisa. What if you sow directly into the soil in the 100s in North Texas, Zone 7B?
Well, cucumber, zucchini, and squash, that's fine to direct sow. You're going to have to water every day, because 100-degree temperature, sun beating down, can warm that soil up to 120 degrees. So it can kill off germinating seeds. And you're probably going to have to water them every day for a good 10 to 14 days. Summer crops, again, you could use a shade cloth, cool it down, and things work a little bit better. If you're talking more about today's topic, I wouldn't plant any fall seeds right now if it's 100 degrees. That's pretty hot. If you want to, because I always encourage people to experiment, you would have to do that with a shade cloth. You're going to need something over that soil so that when you're putting in the cool weather crops, they're not baking up to that, ridiculously high temperature. If you're not going to use shade cloth, you really want things to be getting into the 80s during the day. And that just does make a little bit of a difference.
Yeah, and that's again where you can manage your expectations. Like, don't expect the cool weather crops to come up in 100-degree temperature. They probably won't. So if you're waiting for those cool weather crops to germinate, just keep that in mind. Is the best time to do it is really, like Gary said, when the temperatures are more in the 80s or 70s during the day. Okay, let's see here. I saw a question about, Gary, something specifically for your area here from Sister Marcel. How you doing, Sister Marcel? Gary, for our area in Maryland, do you recommend planting cover crops if we are not using the garden bed?
I actually don't. And the reason being, well, I mean, you made a good point. You're not using the beds. If you're not using the beds right now, a cover crop would be okay. But I recommend more compost. Like, the cover crops are great if you don't have a lot of compost. So number one, I always tell you and say to people, start composting right away before you even plant your first garden. I use a lot of mulch. So my compost that's not fully broken down, instead of cover crops, I will put actually fresh grass clippings down, or compost that's halfway broken down right onto the bed. Acts like a cover crop in that, it's going to bring nutrients to the garden. What I found with the cover crops is, again, I'm still planting, so I'm using the beds. And then when I get them in, the cold comes too fast, deep temperatures come too fast, and I don't feel like I get the full benefit out. Cover crops are great when you have months of a period of time before you're going to use that bed.
Mulch is huge, I think, especially, I mean, for any garden bed, even if you're planting in it, but I think especially when you have an empty garden bed. And the easiest thing in the world is just look around here at what's behind us, and on the ground is this tree above us. It's just, there's leaves everywhere. And in the fall, you're going to have many more if you have a few trees in your yard. If you don't have trees, I've even been known to go to local parks with black garbage bags and scoop up leaves to save for my garden, and then mulch your garden beds with them. But not only will leaves help keep the moisture in, during the winter time, they're going to help your soil from eroding, and the worms just love leaves. So they're going to chew them up and then deposit their worm castings in the soil, and then you'll just have so much good organic matter in the soil from the leaves breaking down as well. So highly recommend just collect all the leaves you can in the fall. We're all trying to save money. The economy is crazy right now. Inflation's crazy. So use what resources you have on hand that are free to really cut down on your garden expenses. Okay, Gary.
Yes.
Well, I don't know if you don't really have Japanese beetles, do you?
We do, but not so much anymore. But.
So Nina is asking, are there any preventative sprays for Japanese beetles?
Well, I know Nina Elizabeth Rose.
Huh.
I don't know if there's a specific spray. I found neem oil, and I don't know if Monterey has a product that works, but I found insect dust works for them. But I also found using the beetle traps, the Japanese beetle traps work well. People have a fear that they're going to bring beetles from around the world to your garden, but they actually pull them to a bag, they die off. Also found that I don't grow grass anymore. This is a naturalized lawn, no chemicals go down. Over the last 4 or 5 years, because I don't have grass, I have clover and all kinds of different things, a little bit of grass. The Japanese beetle population has really plummeted down. So they don't really bother my crops too much. But when I see them come out, they mostly go to my grapes, and I will use an insect dust on there. I will use usually something organic that has spinosad in it, and that can be effective. If that doesn't work, I go to something stronger. But the beetle traps work really, really well. I don't know if you have a product that works.
We have a few Japanese beetles, and Jerry's been known to swat at them with our beetle swatter and kill them, which is great. But Monterey does have a great product to deal with them, and that's the garden insect spray. It has spinosad in it, or spinosad. I never quite know how to say that. But it does work really well for the Japanese beetles. And I believe, Julie, there's a comment from Julie on the screen, you had a really big issue with Japanese beetles, and I believe that was a product that Monterey recommended. And basically, Julie, if I recall correctly, you were saying that that just saved your whatever crop they were infesting or chewing on, the leaves, for that particular crop. So really does work well. So give that a go. Or it's also kind of fun. We enjoy little tennis racket swatter too.
You look like a crazy person.
To smash them, yeah.
Your garden. I do that with the white moths. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. Okay, let's see what other questions we have here in the chat. You know what, before we go to another question, I wanted to mention too about sunlight in the fall garden. Now for us, our fall winter garden is completely different sunlight-wise than our summer garden. Our garden is on the north side of the house. So once the hours of sunlight get less, once we have the time change, the fall equinox, is that what it's called? Or the fall equinox, I can't remember if it's the summer solstice, but fall equinox. Once that happens, our garden is almost completely in shade. So we might have 2 to 3 hours as it progresses towards December of sunlight a day, and that's it. So managing that expectation alone, that we're just not going to be able to grow as many things in the winter garden as we are in the summer garden. So what I like to do is plant in the areas that get the most sun and really focus on that. So if you've watched our videos, you know that that's really the center fountain planter along the back fence. And then on our upper deck, on the new Smart Pots deck, on our upper deck, gets the sun in the wintertime. So plant in the sunniest spot too in your garden. And that way you're going to get the most out of your fall garden. Don't plant it maybe right up against your house where it's going to be shaded all day. You might get a few things from it, but for the maximum production, really look for those spots that stay the sunniest, where you get the most sun during the winter or the fall months.
And I would encourage people, again, to experiment, because you may not know the first year, second year, what it is. And you've been gardening for a while. So you know. So plant a little bit of the fall garden, let's say over there, a little bit over here, And then you're going to be able to see how well these plants do in different parts of your garden. And then next year you use that information to have a better planting plan.
That's right. Because when I first started, I had no idea when we first moved into our house. And I had a lot of expectations for my winter garden. And then over the years, I learned the best spots that they would grow better in the wintertime. Here's a great question from Amber. How you doing, Amber? Will the cold-loving plants survive a freeze if they're growing in containers?
100% yes. So right where the stalk of the plant, to keep it simple, and the roots connect right at the ground level, when that ground level freezes solid and is frozen for several days, that's a lot of times when the plants die off. So if you're just in a container and you get a light frost and maybe that top centimeter, really 2 centimeters, well, 2 centimeters is too much, but that top quarter of an inch freezes, the plants are still going to be okay. So you can plant in containers. They can be hit by a frost. They're going to be okay. Over time, as you get deeper into winter and you're starting to go from surface freeze that's like a quarter of an inch to, half an inch to an inch, that's when the plants often die off. But it has to be many days of that frozen ground. So you have a lot of time and you can certainly plant in containers.
And the great thing is about containers too that I love is that they're so flexible. The smart pots have handles, so you can even move them up against your house to, kind of create a little microclimate. They'll stay warmer if you put them up against a fence or up against your house. Or you can even create a little very simple winter cover that you can, throw over them during hard freezes with just a thicker type of plastic. Put some stakes in your containers, throw it over there, and that way you can extend your growing season a little bit. Now, I know you've got a couple of cold frames in your garden, so if you want to get really fancy, you can build some cold frames. But for simple winter covers, just use plastic or even like an old shower curtain, even like a thick quilt that you might not be using anymore in your house, especially on those nights where it gets really, really cold for southern gardeners. If we're going to get an occasional light frost or cold temperatures, even our tomato plants as the weather nights get colder down throughout the year.
Can I say something about peas?
Sure.
So peas are a cool weather crop, and they're one of my favorite vegetables. So I planted a bunch, 718, and they're a little beat up because it was too early. I got more peas coming in. Peas, cool weather crops, the leaves can take a frost, so they're going to be okay. However, the flowers and the pods can't, and that's what we want to eat. And you can eat the flowers and the tendrils, by the way, but we want to eat the pea pods. So you definitely want to make sure you count back at least 70 days to 90 days before your first frost. And that's when you want to get your peas in. You want them to get to the full size so they're actually producing before the frost comes in. And you can, like we were saying before, look for pea varieties that mature earlier if you're in a tighter window. But peas, unlike the other cool weather crops, the part that we want to eat and harvest is sensitive to frost. So you want a good 70 to 90 days for peas. And they can be tricky, but get them into the ground now and then wait 10 days, 14 days. Put in some more peas. Wait another week or two. Put in some more peas. And you'll figure out the best time to plant them.
That's right. You could even succession plant in the fall. I mean, we talk so much about that in the summertime. But even in the fall, like Gary mentioned, every couple of weeks are great, to succession plant your peas. Your leafy greens, I saw a question there about leafy greens. Definitely, I succession plant leafy greens all winter long because you'll harvest some or you might not quite have enough, maybe pests get some. But that way you can only eat so much lettuce all at once, so many leafy greens all at once. So that way you're planting a smaller area, harvesting those, and they do get to the end of their life, even at times, in the cool weather. So then you'll have another harvest or another batch coming up so that you're not running out of your nice fresh salads during the wintertime. I was going to say something else about, the frost date. One thing we didn't mention, I guess we talked about it a little bit, but if you're brand new to gardening, always check your first and your last frost dates. Those are probably two of the most important dates you want to know. And you can actually look it up. You can Google it. I tend to use farmersalmanac.com quite a bit for that kind of information. And all you have to do is put in your zip code if you're in the US, and it will tell you the average first and last frost date for your area. But that is an average. So it's always a good idea to kind of keep an eye on the temperatures just to kind of see, what it might be doing on that average day when it happens in your area. And you might need to protect your warm weather crops. And you might need to kind of even protect some of your brand new cool weather crops as well. But keep an eye on those dates. and that'll really help you kind of gauge when to start your plants or when to put them outside in the garden.
Yeah, they're best for guidelines, and those guidelines seem to be changing over the years for our gardens. The locusts are getting really
They are.
loud.
They're really singing.
The garden zones have been kind of reformulated over the last year. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but temperatures are changing. So just use the frost dates as guidelines. And then you want a big planting window. Like, I can't stress that enough. Just because you have the date, the first and last frost, it's not like you got to rush out the door by August 17th tomorrow, get everything in, or all is lost.
Right.
You have a window, and that window is what you have to learn about, of when to plant what at the best time.
That's right. And you do learn about it from year to year. So, don't stress about it too much. For example, Clayton is mentioning he's from Monterey. That takedown will work well on beetles along with the trap. So grab some Monterey's takedown over at Monterey Lawn Garden, and that will work really well as the garden insects. Okay, good distinction here, Clayton. If you see the beetles eating the leaves like Japanese beetles, spinosad works the best, which is Monterey's garden insect spray. So Clayton, thank you so much for that confirmation. I really appreciate that. I did want to read this comment here from, Coco Brown Girl. My projected frost date is October 15th. Is it too late to plant peas? So what I like to do is, you have your average last frost date. Look on the back of your seed packet. It might say peas take probably 8 weeks from seed to harvest. But that's generally from transplant to harvest. But that's, like Gary said, just a guideline. Mm-hmm. So October 15th is 2 months away. I would definitely go for it.
Yeah, it's tight.
I would definitely go for it.
But I would go for it. You can eat pea tendrils. They taste just like peas. So you may not get the pods, but you'll be able to use the tendrils and parts of the pea plant in your salads and stuff like that. And they do take 60 to 80 days. Yeah. Try and find a variety that maybe is closer to that 60 days. You can also, sometimes the cold weather settles. So if your peas are up higher, the cold weather and frost is down a little bit lower. You can get the painter's tarp, just thin plastic, cover them over, and that can protect them from a light frost. So maybe, you do get one on October 15th, but then maybe the next one's not really for 10 or 14 days. So your window is tight, but I would definitely give it a try.
Definitely. It's always worth experimenting, trying it out, and then you can always adjust your schedule next year, or just make a note on your calendar or in your journal to maybe back up your planting maybe another 3 to 4 weeks to make sure you're getting a harvest in.
And one more thing, we said it earlier, because you're putting the peas into warm ground right now, they're going to germinate and grow much more quickly. So that 60 days may be more like 70 or 80 days, because the pea plant itself is accelerating the growth because of the warm temperatures right now.
And the other thing, if you can't get them planted in the ground because it's too hot, a lot of people think you can't grow peas from transplants, but I've done it for years and years. Just start some indoors, like end of July, beginning of August, or even a little bit earlier. And then that way, you'll be getting cooler weather, maybe end of August, you have transplant size ready to pop out in the garden rather than starting from seed. And it'll just give you a little bit of a head start, so you may increase your chances of getting a harvest before your frost date. Good question from Esther. How's it going, Esther? Always great to have you here. How deep to plant carrot seeds? Well, I barely cover them with soil. The key with carrots, though, is keeping the soil moist. So I always plant them in pre-moistened soil. I like to grow them in containers because you don't have obstructions like rocks or whatever. For me, they just work better that way. And then keep your soil damp as they're germinating. I usually use like a piece of burlap or a piece of shade cloth to keep the moisture in the soil. And it really is important that you check them every day so they don't dry out.
So they don't dry out. And I've done a video where I would put cardboard down, cardboard stamp, keeps the soil moist. But then for 2 or 3 days, I didn't check them, and they sprouted and they were all leggy and yellow. So if you're putting something over it, make sure you're checking every day. I have carrots growing now that I put in about a month ago. When you're sowing into the warm soil, and my carrots about 1/4 inch, a little bit deeper than yours, but they work. And water every day, because they could germinate. 95-degree day, sun's beating down, it can dry out and kill off the germinating seeds. So definitely for carrots, because of the moisture needs, water every day for 14 days. and then go to every other day. But you want to keep them moist. After 14 days, the roots get down pretty deep so they can survive. But moisture is really the key.
Definitely. And then as they grow, you want to kind of thin them out to be, every few inches apart, just so your carrot roots have enough room to grow and aren't hitting into each other. And then you'll get, much better, excuse me, much more well-shaped carrots, or more carrots that grow to size, I should say. I did see a question here. Oh, here's one from Angela, and Amber will answer yours in just a moment. Angela, hi y'all. I lost some beans and am rebooting lemon squash about 3 weeks post-germination. I planted late. Should I try for a fall garden? I always say go for it.
I say no. No, definitely, for sure. And good for you for trying again. So you still have time. Try putting in bush beans now. They still have a chance to grow. Squash, I'm on my 3rd round. They germinate really quickly, so give you credit for doing that. That's so important.
Absolutely.
So many people just plant these warm crops in June. We struggle to keep them alive. We keep in beat up plants we should have yanked out. Just keep planting July, June, or June, July, August. And then for a fall garden, I would definitely give it a try. Tuck stuff in where you can. Maybe grow a couple of things. If you've not done a fall garden before, grow what you like. But take the notes, like we've been saying, and it will really set you up for success next year, even if things struggle a little bit for the fall garden this year.
Definitely. It's always worth a try. Here's a question from Amber I was looking for. Thanks, Jerry, for putting it on the screen. How close can you plant the cold weather seeds or transplants underneath tomatoes, as you mentioned earlier? How close is too close?
Well, too close to the tomato plant or too close together. So the distance for the actual crops that you're planting, the guidelines on the back of the packet are pretty good. I tend to plant things more closely together. If you have the tomato plant here, the soil like around here is going to be filled with surface weeds, surface roots. So you're going to have to go out fairly far to get away from that dense amount of surface roots around the tomato plant. You can do a trick is add in 2 inches, 3 inches of compost or soil on top of those roots, and then you can pretty much plant wherever you want. They're going to germinate in that 2 inches of new soil. The roots will find their way through the surface roots of the tomato plant. So it's really up to you how you want to do it.
That's one thing I was going to mention too, is we've talked, I talk a lot about composting. Gary, you've talked a lot about it. You can keep your compost pile going through the winter time too. So if you haven't started yet, for you small space gardeners, just start in a couple of smart pots or a couple of containers. And that way you'll continue to have compost. It'll be ready for the springtime. And even if it freezes during the winter, that just kind of accelerates the breakdown process. It freezes, thaws.
That's good.
And it's all good for the compost. But grab some of that compost now when you're putting in your fall crops and add it into your soil. Give it some new life. It really helps with the soil structure. The microbes are in there, and it's just going to really help your fall crops take off, because our summer crops have been growing for several months now. Even like the heavy feeders, the tomatoes, the squash, they really do take a lot out of the soil. So just pop in some compost, throw in some organic granular fertilizer, and don't stress about it too much. Just kind of mix it into the top level of the soil. Plant your seeds in there, and that'll really help your fall crops take off that much better. Okay, question from Ami Soul. We'll just call you that. Ami Surf. I'm not sure. I can't exactly read that name there. But thanks for joining us. And question is, I'm in Maryland, Zone 7B. We've got a lot of Maryland people here today. When is the best time to set out peas and green starts for our area?
So peas, I've direct seeded July 18th. That was a little bit too early. I put some in about 7 or 10 days ago. That seems like a good time. But you can put peas in right now. Like I would really try and do it this weekend. The greens, lettuce, I put in a couple weeks ago. You can put in lettuce now. You can put in spinach now. Might be a little bit hot for spinach, but I would go for it. You can put in your kale. You can put in your collards. You can really start getting a lot now into the Maryland Zone 7 gardens. Peas, again, we were already talking about that. We probably won't get our frost till the end of October, and it probably won't be that bad. So you have definitely time for the peas. If in our temperatures we see like in a week from now, it's going to be 95, 100 degrees, just make sure if you don't put down shade cloth, you keep everything moist. And I want to stress again, direct seeding the cool crops into our gardens now, you want to water them every day. Even if it looks cloudy, even if you get a little bit of rain, water every day for a good 10 to 14 days so they get established.
We do have a super chat here from Coco Brown Girl. Thank you so much. $5. Really appreciate your support. Appreciate you being here. And we just love that you're here watching and learning all about fall gardening. Okay, I saw another question here about leeks. And I know you've got leeks growing, Gary. I actually have never grown leeks before. It's a perfect question for you. From Majakan, I have planted some summer leeks and winter leeks. How can I tell when they're ready to be harvested?
So, like many garden vegetables, you can harvest them whenever you want. So a leek, you can eat the leaves, and it tastes, people who have not grown them before, it tastes like a mild onion. You don't get a bulb, but you get a stem like the size of my thumb. Some of the winter leeks, they're really thick, and they're just kind of look like bunching onions. You can just watch them. You're waiting for that stem to really thicken up to a good size so that when you pull it out, you have a nice white piece to the stem where the roots are. You chop that up, you use it. It's really, to give you a guideline, I'm just thinking about my leeks now. It's a good 80 days before I would pull them out, but they can take up to 120 days. But somewhere between 80 and 120 days between that variety, you can start taking some of them out. But they will get really thick. And the more actually compost you use and have really moist soil, the bigger and better your leeks get.
Wonderful. And I know leek soup.
Leek and potato soup.
Leek potato soup. And you've got potatoes too.
I have a video on that actually.
Oh, cool. So go over and check out Gary's video. And just in case I didn't mention, a lot of you I'm sure already know, but check out Gary's channel, The Rusted Garden, and your website, Rusted Garden Homestead.
TheRustedGarden.com.
And TheRustedGarden.com for his seed and garden shop. And he also has 2 books. Could you tell us about your books?
First book is The Modern Homestead Garden, which I really wanted to do. It really details how to start your first garden, how to maintain a garden, good for beginners, you know, mid-range gardeners and stuff like that. And it's about taking the idea of a homestead and modernizing it so that, you know, we have to go to work, we have to do all of our stuff, but you can still have a homestead garden where you kind of make it your space, you grow for the family, you grow for friends, and it just adds to your trips to the grocery store. Like, you don't have to move off grid and get rid of everything, but the modern homestead garden will teach you how to grow food. Growing an edible landscape really focuses on taking a lawn and green space, dropping in a garden, dropping in fruit trees. Instead of having bushes and stuff that you can't eat or can't use, replace them with a blueberry bush or with currants. And how do you turn the whole landscape into something more edible? Like I have, I don't know, 16 fruit trees. I use strawberries as ground cover. I use blueberry bushes for my bushes in different places. But it really walks you through how to transform your space into an edible landscape. But the whole idea is, and same thing we always talk about, is you can start small. You don't have to get a garden as big as mine to start. You can start with a couple of beds. You can transition over one bed along your house line to something new. But those 2 books will really get you started, and I'm actually really proud of them. For those of you who have not written books, when you're writing, it's a terrible, miserable process.
It's a long process.
And then it's done, and you kind of forget what you went through. Then all of a sudden, months later, you're looking at them, and you're like, wow, that turned out pretty good. So I'm really happy with how they turned out.
They are. And I just got to peruse through your edible landscape while we were here. I've seen it online before, but it was great to look at all the beautiful photos. I co-wrote it with the Kiara, who's in charge of the Freetown Farm Garden. So it's a really beautiful book. So I highly encourage you to pick up your copy. And as most of you know, I have 3 books, Organic Gardening for Everyone. If you want more information on like warm weather crops versus cool weather crops, starting from seed all the way to harvest, you want to pick up that book. And then The First Time Gardener Raised Bed Gardening has lots of raised bed projects in it, from soil recipes of trellises to anything you need to know growing in raised beds. And then my new book is now available for pre-order. So I'm very excited about that. A lot of you heard about it on last week's live stream. It's called The 10-Minute Gardener. So it's quick, actionable tips that you can do in your garden in 10 minutes or under. And it's broken down by time. So I've got 3-minute tips, 5-minute tips, 8-minute tips, 10-minute tips, and even a few things that you can do in 30 minutes on the weekends. So you can pre-order that at CaliKimGardenHome.com. But it's a fun book for anyone, whether you're a newbie or a seasoned gardener, and will really help you just maximize the time you do have into short little time. While a lot of snippets of time add up to a lot. So you can grab that over on our website. I've got a couple of free pre-order bonuses too that you can check out while you're over there.
Can I say something about your book?
Sure.
So one of the questions I get is, how do you not get disappointed in your garden? People ask me, because there's failures. And I've been doing this for 30 some years. I still have things that fail, you know, and you're sad when it happens, but you focus on the success. People get overwhelmed because there's so much to do, and they get this big list of things, and they just go down the list, and they're like, I got more to do, I got more to do, I got more to do. I think your book helps simplify that so that you're not overwhelmed with everything you have to do, gives you a focus and a way to manage the tasks of a garden, and then you're going to end up having a better experience. I got to look at it. I don't know, because I was late on writing a piece for it. I don't know if I'll be on there, but I got to look at the book, and it's really, really good.
Thanks, Gary. I appreciate it. And that's one reason why I wrote it, because I get overwhelmed, I get burned out, and I wanted to pass some of the things I've learned onto you all, because I hear that a lot. It's a lot to keep up, but break it down and into small chunks, and you can definitely have a life and have a garden at the same time. Okay, Gary, here's a question for you from Lisa. Will you be doing a big different bag of seeds again in your store? The variety pack had like 20 different varieties in it.
So the answer is maybe. We're in transition between what we work with for seeds and what we're selling now. So when that all goes smoothly, we're going to have a bunch of discount packages like that. Towards the end of the season, we will be taking our seeds, and even though, you know, it's been a year, seeds last for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. So I recommend to people, put your seeds in a Ziploc bag, put them in a refrigerator if you want to, but they do well outside. They're going to last and last. So at the end of the year, we're going to have some discounts in there. You probably do the same, but we don't have that specific package that you're referencing right now.
So here's a question from Jen. When to bring smart pots of peppers indoors in the garage to overwinter? Is there a recommended temperature threshold? North Carolina, zone 8A, first frost, November 1. We actually just talked about overwintering peppers on our video that we filmed today, so be watching for that. What I tend to look for, and it's different for me because I'm in Southern California, but when the pepper production starts to decline, in the fall as the temperatures get colder, I will definitely get them ready for overwintering. But really, for you in North Carolina, the temperatures will start to decline, or the peppers will start to decline. First frost November 1, probably when the temperatures go down into the probably 60s, 50s during the day, down into the 30s at night. And before it freezes solid, you definitely want to prune them off, leave one little Y at the bottom, and you can even stick it up against your house, mulch it with a couple inches of mulch, cover it with a piece of plastic, or you can bring them into the garage and keep them moist enough over the winter time, not super heavy water, but just moist enough so they don't die, and then bring them back out into the spring. Now, I don't know if you've overwintered peppers here or if you just grow them again.
I mean, not enough to really talk about it. I mean, I think you covered it. And generally, when the night temperatures are hanging in the 50s and it's not getting, past that during the day, it's too cold for peppers. So you can start thinking about everything you just said.
Right. I mean, they're going to grow best in the 70s, 80s, 90s. So once it gets down into that area, you're not going to be getting a lot of extra new production out of them anyway. Okay, Dawn in the Mountains, is it better to sow spinach or let me just say about spinach,
right.
I'll let you take this question. Spinach is one vegetable that I really don't ever have a lot of luck growing. I don't know if it just doesn't like me or what, but the temperatures too in our area tend to be like up and down a lot in the wintertime. So whenever I try and plant seeds, they take a while to germinate, which spinach does anyway, but then they come up and they just don't really take off and thrive. So I think it does have a lot to do with our fluctuating winter temperatures. What's been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, spinach grows well here, and the long-standing, is it Bloomsdale? Or there's Giant Noble, which does really well here, and then the long-standing, I think, Bloomsdale. Both of those varieties grow really good here in Maryland. They do take a while to germinate, and sometimes with higher temperatures, they don't germinate as quick. But I would direct seed them. I would keep them well watered. Maybe now, like in Maryland, or in a week, maybe 2 weeks. They do really well. Always good though to do a backup, because this is a perfect example. Maybe you're just doing it for the first time. Plant some in containers, larger containers, not the real tiny ones. And we sell starting stuff at my seed shop, or a big yogurt cup with holes in it. Start them, you know, some of them in containers. Don't let them sit out and bake in the sun all day. Put them somewhere where they get morning sun. So you've got your transplants going and you have your ones that you direct seeded, and just kind of see which ones seem to do better. If they both survive, bonus, you know, you have more to put out. If the the direct seeded ones don't grow, most likely your seed starts are okay, then you're going to have spinach. And I think that's a good example of a question where all of our gardens are different. So you do want to experiment, you do want to try out different things. So I would do both.
I think we're going to take a few more questions, Gary. I can't believe we've been streaming for almost an hour. It's felt like 5 minutes.
Really?
Yeah, it's really great. So we'll take a few more questions, then we'll sign off for the night. But I really appreciate all the interaction in the chat. It's really great to see this garden community. I mean, we're all supportive of each other, and just it's so fun to throw around different gardening ideas, really from all over the world.
All right.
So we have a question here from Terry. Terry, I have a raised bed that's about 8 inches deep, 3 by 5. Would your potatoes grow well in there? I usually do grow bags, but wanted to try it. Now, I know I don't have a lot of experience growing potatoes, and you've grown them successfully.
Well, I'm going to answer it two ways. So I grow potatoes directly in the ground in mounds, and it's not a raised bed. So if your raised bed has a bottom with drainage, that's going to be a little bit different. And some people have that because of where they're growing on rocky surfaces. So they have the 8 inches and they grow different crops. If your raised bed is just 8 inches, but it's connected right to the earth, you can definitely grow potatoes in that, you know, but they're going to need to be able to reach into soil below and do their thing. You might have to loosen the soil to a good 12 inches, but you plant potatoes about 4 inches, 6 inches deep, you let them go, short version, and you should be able to get potatoes.
Wonderful. Okay, Gary, any ideas? This is from Stahl. How to get slime mold out of my garden beds? I've never dealt with slime mold.
No, I don't really get it. I get your question. I mean, I don't really get slime mold. Sometimes if it's shadier, you'll get mold, you'll get slimes. They're not actually usually bad for the garden. They just look unsightly. You can always prune around them and try and get sunlight. Like sunlight is the great disinfectant. You can also have peat moss, soil, something around, and when you see algae build up or you see mold build up, just cover it over with some soil and see how that goes. But I've not known of any specific slimy mold that is necessarily bad, well, dangerous to your garden plants.
It's a question from Suzanne. Are the books available on both of your websites, or do they need to be purchased on Amazon? The books that are already out, like my 2 books, Gary's 2 books, are available on both of our websites. And actually, when you purchase them on our websites, it helps us out quite a bit more than if you purchase them on Amazon. So that really would be great. Plus, you get signed copies. Now, you can purchase them wherever you like. My new book, The 10-Minute Gardener, it's not available from our, we don't have physical copies in hand yet. So there's links on our website of different online retailers that you can purchase them from. And then what we have set up now is once you get that book, pre-order it, you can come back to our website. There's a spot there where you can enter your pre-order number, and we'll actually send you a digital download, a little excerpt from the book, as well as a $10 coupon to our site. So it's just kind of our way of saying thank you for pre-ordering. But I know you ship out signed copies. Do you still do signed copies?
So
okay.
I'm actually out of books at my website, so I won't have any money for 30 days. But you can go to Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, just about anywhere that you can buy books and find them online for all of our books. But
that's right.
You know, you have a nice stock at your website.
It's a good problem to be sold out.
Yeah, but well, it's because I was lazy and didn't reorder. But you know, but you can find them anywhere.
Okay, let's take one last question. And I am going to direct this to Gary as well, because he was just sharing with me that he has these growing, or at one point had mushrooms growing. So PJ is asking what to do about mushroom. Oh, this might not be the kind of mushrooms we want to grow, but what to do about mushrooms growing in a raised bed.
So I do grow mushrooms in a shadier area, straw, hay, wood chips, wine cap mushrooms. They grow really well. If you don't want them, again, you don't have to really worry about mushrooms. You know, if they're mixed in where you're harvesting like lettuce and greens and you might grab a piece of mushroom, that's a problem. Sunlight helps get rid of them. Sometimes you have to remove them. Otherwise, the mushrooms just kind of come and go, especially when you get a lot of rain or it's been humid. And they actually help decompose and break things down. So they're not necessarily harmful. if they're growing in a place where you're not going to accidentally pick them or grab your lettuce or spinach, I would just let them go. You can't really prevent them or get rid of them. The spores are usually everywhere. And you'll find that when you bring in mulch, that's when the spores. Are you coming to say hi, or are you booting us off?
Camera guy from the control room here.
You can't really control the spores, so they're going to pop up in different places.
And I just want to give the information here for Gary again. I saw someone asking about his website. Well, Gary, I'll let you say it.
My website for like neem oil, different oils, seed starting stuff, seeds, therustedgarden.com. And then you can find me on YouTube and Instagram under The Rusted Garden.
Just Google The Rusted Garden and Gary will pop up.
Yep.
Jerry, thanks for hanging out in the control room and keeping the whole live stream going here.
You too.
Appreciate it.
We're fabulous, and you both received another super chat there.
Super chat, thank you.
Congratulations.
Tiny Purple Garden, $5. Thanks for doing this Q&A, and you both give great advice.
Tiny Purple's great.
And your enthusiasm is amazing. Thank you so much, Tiny Purple.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Monterey, Clayton Smith, thank you for being here. Great questions today from everybody.
Great, what's the word? Vibes here on the live stream.
It was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. And remember, for those of you who usually join us on Monday, we're not going to be live streaming on this coming Monday. We will be back on the Monday after that at our regular time of noon Pacific time. So thanks for joining us, and have a great weekend, everyone, and get planting your fall seeds. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.